Hello everyone and welcome to another casual review. Today I'm talking about Scott Pilgrim versus the World, the game to be specific. Now, I was a huge fan of the movie back in the day. My then girlfriend, now wife, and I saw this movie, I want to say probably like 2 or 3 times when it was in theater. And then we immediately bought it when it came to DVD or Blu-ray. We just absolutely loved this movie and I would quote it all of the time. It really resonated with us as teens. Now, we had recently watched it now and it didn't quite land as well as it used to. I'm not quite sure why. Maybe it's just because I've seen the movie so many times, but one way or another, we are not here to talk about the movie. We are here to talk about the game. Now, the game itself actually has a pretty interesting history as well. For those of you who do not know, this game originally came out for the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation. Now, it wasn't a physical there were no physical versions of this game, but you could download it, and this was up for like a year or two, just a very limited amount of time, and then suddenly it was taken off of the online stores, and you could no longer purchase this game if you wanted to try it out. You just had to have hoped that you had purchased it online digitally before they took it off of the stores, and I was one of the ones who was lucky enough to have downloaded it in that brief period of time because I had loved the movie so much. Now, this game is more based on the comic book rather than the movie. The movie is also based on the comic book, but it takes things in a different direction. And I've never read the comic book myself, so I'm not quite sure how similar the actual video game and the comic book are with each other. But regardless, this is a side-scrolling, retro-inspired beat-em-up game. Now, normally I do not like beat-em-up games. They just don't land with me. I don't have any nostalgia for these types of games, and the only real side-scrolling beat-em-up game that I really did enjoy is Castle Crashers, and that's kind of more of like a modern take on the genre. So when I had downloaded this game on the Xbox 360, I bounced off of it pretty hard. I only put maybe like half an hour into it, and I never thought of it again until all of this news coverage came around saying like how it's such this precious gem that we all wish that we could just download and play, but unfortunately no digital storefront is letting us purchase this game. So it kind of became a white whale for a lot of people, something that was quite coveted actually. And the whole time I'm thinking to myself like, really? Was it that good? Maybe it's just because like maybe I didn't give it enough time because I only put about half an hour into it, but I didn't think about it again until it came back. There was a resurgence. It came back to all of the digital storefronts, the Nintendo Switch, the Xboxes, the PlayStations, everything. And I was like, oh, that's cool. I think I'm good though. And then it came to my attention again when the company Limited Run Games made a physical production of this game, and that's kind of when I started to turn my head a little bit like, oh man, I do like me some physical games. Maybe I should give this game another try, and I still put it off. I decided not to buy the physical version of this game, and it wasn't until I was at Best Buy just last week and I saw this game on the shelf. I guess Best Buy and Limited Run Games kind of have this deal going on where they will stock some of Limited Run's product, and that's when I was like, okay, I'm going to give Scott Pilgrim versus the World another shot on my Nintendo Switch. So I snatched up the game and I gave it another shot, and I gotta be honest, I'm still not a side-scrolling beat-em-up fan, but let me get all into it. Let me just really dive into it. If you aren't familiar with Scott Pilgrim versus the World, the plot itself is basically our hero of the story, Scott Pilgrim. He learns about this girl. He falls in love with her by the name of Ramona Flowers, and he just absolutely falls head over heels for her, and he finds out that Ramona Flowers has 7 evil ex-boyfriends, and he is tasked with defeating all 7 of her exes before they can officially date. It's kind of a fun little story, and it's very, as far as like the movie goes, and even the video game to some degree, it's kind of like more of a quirky, random humor, and maybe that's why I loved it so much as a teenager. I definitely feel like the game lends itself a little more to that kind of comic booky take, that more cartoony aesthetic rather than the movie. Like, it would be weird if they tried to make like this pixelated version of Michael Cera or something. So it is a 4-player cooperative game. Obviously, I play this game solo player because I am a big handheld play it on the go type of guy. So I played solo player, and you are able to choose between a selection of different characters. You can play as like Scott, Ramona, you can play as Kim, you can play as Knives Chow if you sign up for the EA Ubisoft account, whatever that kind of thing is. I ended up choosing to play as my favorite character in the movie, and that is Kim, the drummer. I'm not sure how different each of the characters are from each other. I'm not sure if they all have different moves or if they all get the same and they just have a different aesthetic. As far as Kim goes, you are given 2 special abilities that you kind of use this mana-like resource to use these 2 special abilities. One is, for Kim at least, is Knives Chow beams down, she kisses Kim, and heals Kim a little bit of health, and then when she leaves, she does damage to everyone on the screen. And then Kim's other special ability is she's a drummer, so she kind of swings around and does this AoE attack with her drumsticks. And then you are acquiring experience points, and every time you level up, you get a new combo attack. It doesn't use up any like resource or anything like that. And I'm not sure here how different Kim would be compared to someone like Scott Pilgrim in terms of these leveling up abilities that you do unlock. I really like the ability that I unlocked with Kim eventually, where you can kind of like pogo jump on top of enemies to attack them, kind of like how Shovel Knight does with his shovel when he aims it down. So I was able to kind of chain together these pogo jumps on top of enemies. That was kind of my go-to, and then when they would fall down to the ground, I would do this little slide ability or downwards kick to damage them while they're down, because most of the time in these old school side-scrolling beat-em-up games, you have to wait for the enemy to get up in order to attack them again. So it was nice that they gave me some options here. And that's kind of like the overall tone during my playthrough of this game. Is at the very beginning, I was very frustrated just because I don't have a lot of movement. Your character's default movement is by walking, and you kind of have to like double tap on the movement controller in order to get them to run. And I just feel like the side-scrolling beat-em-up controls are weird and clunky, and the hitboxes on them are really hard to land, and I just have a lot of complaints with how these things move and control. And it's probably just because I don't have any nostalgia playing these on arcade machines or anything like that, but I want it to move more like Castle Crashers rather than some retro beat-em-up game. I even have trouble like interacting with objects, you can pick up like weapons from the ground and throw them, and you can pick up trash cans, and you can pick up even enemies that you knock off their feet. You can pick up the enemies and throw them at the other enemies, and ideally that all sounds really fun and you could chain together these cool attacks, but it's just hard to pick up these objects, and like the game doesn't recognize what I want it to do, and I have to keep on trying in order to make it happen. By then you really have to play on your feet, so you're ending up getting hit yourself, and that's another big complaint about this game, more about the genre in general, where if I get hit, you get knocked off your feet and you land on your back, and then you have to wait for your character to get up, and this takes about 5 seconds, but you are able to get chained and hit on your back over and over again. Especially if you're playing single player, it's like you versus 5 or 6 enemies, and these enemies can chain together hits and just make it so you can never get up, and it is very frustrating and clunky and slow. Eventually at least as Kim, I unlocked this ability where if I got hit in the air, I could hurry and recover before I got knocked off my feet and had to do that animation again. But it's just so frustrating. I feel like I'm fighting the game the whole time, trying to get the game to do what I want it to do. And I totally get it. Like that's how these retro beat 'em ups are. Like that's what it was. It's supposed to be very nostalgic and reminiscent of a time in that genre, and I get that. But it's just not necessarily for me in this case. I feel like I would have enjoyed it a lot more if they modernized it more like Castle Crashers. Now, another complaint that I have that is more reminiscent of the retro days of old on arcade cabinets is it doesn't really explain stuff, and you kind of have to look some of this stuff up. And one of them is how stats work. Now, every time you level up, you defeat enemies, you get experience, and you level up. But instead of increasing your stats at all, your attack, your defense, all that kind of stuff, it doesn't give you any of that. You only unlock new abilities that I talked about earlier. So So how do you increase your stats? Well, you have to go into the storefronts and then you buy an item, and you just hope that the item gives you the upgrade that you want. Like if you want more strength, you kind of have to look it up online which items will give you additional strength, because it doesn't tell you ahead of time until you buy the object, and then the item will say what it just boosted up. So it's just another thing. It's like, why can't you explain this? Not to mention some of their stats are a little weird, that they just have like weird names, weird nomenclature, and you just kind of have to like look it up what each one of these stats does. I think I just would have appreciated maybe a little more hand holding. I know that sounds kind of noobish to say, but whatever. I guess I'm a noob, especially when it comes to this genre. And while we're on the topic of shopping, your level select kind of works similar to something like Super Mario Brothers 3, where it's this overworld map with these paths, and each level is like this little circle. Now, in a normal game like this, there would be a designated shopping area that you go to, and you do your shopping, you spend all the money that you've acquired, and then you go into an actual battling level. But in this game, you have to go to a particular level that has enemies. Like, it's treated like a normal combat level, and you have to go into the storefront that you want to find, and you're just hoping that you don't get beat up too much while you're going to the record store or whatever store you want to go to. It's just like, give me my own designated shopping area where I don't have to worry about combat for a second. That being said, all of this stuff felt a little more manageable as I played more of the game. I got familiar with the stats and the items and where everything is and how the combat works, and I unlocked better abilities that helped me maneuver easier. So over time, this did get easier, but it was certainly always like a minor frustration to me. Another retro aspect of this that I didn't like is the implementation of lives and continues. So you are given 3 lives, and if you use up all 3 of your lives, then you get a game over, and you're going to have to start over at a certain checkpoint. Now, each level isn't a checkpoint. It's like every 3 levels is a checkpoint. So if you are deep into this 3rd level and you get a game over, you got to play through all 3 of those levels over again. And I just felt like the whole aspect of lives and continues is so outdated and frustrating. And so what I really ended up doing is if I beat this whole section and I got to a checkpoint and I only had 1 life left, I would end up just killing myself, triggering that checkpoint, that game over, and renewing all 3 of my lives before I dived deeper into the game. And I just felt like this really slowed down the whole process. The good news here is you are able to hold on to your experience points and your money, so you are able to kind of boost up your character that way, and will make this next attempt of these 3 levels a little easier. Some of this game can be pretty frustrating and difficult. Now, at the beginning of the game, it had you choose your difficulty, and I chose the easiest one. It was called Average Joe, and I still had a really tough time, especially with some of these bosses. I feel like they were really unfair, and I'd already talked about getting comboed by a bunch of enemies and never being able to get onto my feet. It was a frustrating time, at least in my opinion, and I totally get that this type of game is made for the whole multiplayer aspect. It's made to be played with 4 players all helping each other out, and I totally get that, but maybe they should just ramp down the difficulty for single player, or at least give me like an easier difficulty rather than Average Joe. Give me like a noob difficulty. Now, I've been complaining about this game a ton, and it's really unfortunate because I absolutely love everything about this game besides the gameplay. I think that the chip tunes, the music in this game is absolutely wonderful. It's the type of music that I would listen to on YouTube over and over again outside of playing this game. And oh, I just love this whole pseudo retro pixel style look too. It's very reminiscent of the days of old, just like how the gameplay is, but I love that aesthetic. I think it just has so much charm and lovability to it, and if you like beat 'em up games, I think you will really with this game in particular, because just the world, and it's just so fun to look at. It's just not that fun to play, in my opinion. There's a ton of fun references to other video games, old video game tropes, things like I saw a reference to Mega Man. There's a bunch of Mario references. One where if you find hidden areas, then they have these question mark blocks that if you hit, then coins shoot out. Or one where like a castle gets destroyed and then a little flag pops up, just like in Super Mario World. Just lots of fun little references and fan service to gamers who played games during that era. Seriously though, I wanted to like it so much more than I actually do, and obviously I'm in the minority here because everyone just absolutely raves about this game, so I know that I'm in the wrong. Still, as far as my own personal ranking for this game, I'm gonna have to give it a 3 out of 5, but I just hear if you like beat 'em ups, then you will probably think this is a 5 out of 5 game because it just has this whole fan base surrounding it. Everyone loves Scott Pilgrim versus the World, the game. So gather up your 3 friends and give it a try and let me know what your experience is, or let me know some of your past thoughts about this game. Did you read the comics? You watch the movie? Let's just talk about Scott Pilgrim in general. I'd love to hear what you have to say, and I'll talk to you later. Bye!